Aloha, I'm Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, host of Sustainable Hawaii. Today, our show is titled Mapping the Past to Guide Our Future. My guest, Tom Penna, is producing a groundbreaking documentary demonstrating traditional knowledge about natural resources on Oahu. I've invited him back to share in greater depth his maps and photos of these resources and how they've changed with modern development. Hopefully some of this knowledge will also help us to adapt as we develop further. Tom received his degree in education at the University of Hawaii and taught Hawaiian history for several years. Tom spent 2 decades researching the information that will be shared in this documentary. So without further ado, welcome Tom back to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. So tell us exactly what the Homai Kapono project, the documentary, is.
The film really, it's meant to be a blueprint for the things that need to be in place to regain sustainability. But I'd like to clarify even our understanding of sustainability. Sustainability is much more than things like renewable energy and the food we eat, etc. It's actually a sustainable state of living with the environment in a way that can perpetuate life indefinitely. And the project really focuses on understanding this island traditionally. And what that means is the natural cycles, the value system that was in place, and their understandings about life that allowed it to perpetuate. And so the idea is for sustainability to stick in Hawaii, those same principles need to be engaged again, those traditional principles.
And in addition to creating this as a documentary that you're going to be sharing with the world, once you've raised the finances you need to finish it, you're also going to be building on the website that you've established and sharing many of the knowledge resources for people to use for teaching tools, correct?
Yes, that's right. The website has really become a library, essentially. You know, when I started researching this in earnest with the idea of actually making a movie and building a website, I started to realize that there is so much information out there now. But I noticed that you had to do a lot of research to find information, and I kind of wanted to put it all in one place. That was the original idea. And then as I began going further into the research, I realized that the things that I was learning were unique in comparison to what is typically out there. And my focus was always on how do we understand this particular island at that root level of intimacy, and what are the factors that allow us to live in a way that is can allow us to perpetuate. So I always look for models of peace and the main values that will allow for life to unfold. Yes. So
some of the things that are going to be on the website, or already are, that you're building to demonstrate those values and that understanding are, I know that you've created a phenomenal map that we're going to be seeing of Oahu, and particularly its stream routes. You also have a lunar calendar, and you'll be telling us a lot about that. You have a lot of data points that people can use.
Yeah.
What are the things that you're going to be making available for the public to use?
The main thing is, I think of primarily 2 resources: the maps and then the lunar calendars. And then there's also a growing video library of the interviews and the footage that I have. And so it's meant to be a resource. And there's also a component of different skills that each of us can embody to allow the changes to unfold. Because really this was not meant to memorialize traditional Hawaiian culture as the past, but more of a blueprint of what things need to be in place for us to regain our balance with the environment. And so to me, when I made the maps, it was really like with the understanding of we have to understand the story in a particular way. And when you learn traditional place names, that's basically the core essence of that place. And even when you say the names, you're actually relationship building with that place. That's a traditional interpretation of that.
Especially because those names all had a deep meaning and sometimes layers of meaning. They had a kauna, right? As well as, maybe explain what kauna is.
I think, for one thing, I'm not a language expert, that's for sure, but
I'm surprised you speak it so well.
The concepts are basically this, and I think about this quite a bit. I'm like, why our view of traditional Hawaiian history is very much institutionalized by books and even by dictionaries. And what I mean by that is, for instance, if you want to know a word, you look it up, and that gives a literal interpretation of the word. But actual words, when they were spoken traditionally, it's a whole layered concept, right? And so the literal meaning was one layer. The second metaphorical and poetic meaning was the kauna. And then underneath that would be the root essence of the word, the universal principle of that word. And that would be the noahuna, is what it would be called. So really, as you begin learning about the story of this island, you see that noahuna is really the part that captures the real essence beyond the word even.
That's fascinating. It goes beyond even when we think about Latin roots to Romance languages. It's something deeper than that. I know one of the things that you have been studying and learning over the years are some of the olelo, or the stories that embody the history and the knowledge of the natural resources as well. Are you including some of those olelo on the website or in the documentary?
In the documentary, I really make a point to what are the little known gems that are so crucial to understanding this island and the roles that we all can play. And so when you go about it that way, and if you dig real deep into the research, you're going to come across a whole new list of concepts that you hardly ever hear spoken about. And one of them would be ka'anani'au.
Say that again?
Ka'anani'au.
Ka'anani'au.
And that's a very strong principle for Oahu, and you could even say the world. And that's something that if you were to research that word, for instance, you would, in the Pukui dictionary, you would see that was the name of an old Ahupua boundary marker on this island. And then when you learn the layers of depth beneath that, it's one of the deepest Hawaiian concepts you can ever come across, actually. And so that's something that will be explained in the movie. And by the way, the narration of the movie is only Hawaiian people or people that really strongly perpetuate a value. So I'm definitely not doing any narration.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we talked about in our last show, and I'm afraid we didn't give the name, but in the importance, excuse me, of names, we talked about the book on Hawaiian rain names, and we found there's over 200. And that book is Hanau Ka'ua, and it's Kiele Gonzalez with her mom, Kumuhula Lemomi Akana. And they put together a wonderful book with University of Hawaii Press Publishing that our audience should definitely go look at. And it's fascinating, the name of each rain and the meaning of some of those rains, like the persistent rain of Hilo has a name, and the downpours of Waialeale on Kauai has a name, and many other gradations in between.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You know, when you really go through all these little layers that we see now, we're beginning to see more, is every moment had a name. Okay, think of that. Not just the rain, I mean, yeah, that's palpable. Not just the wind, but yeah, that's palpable. But it's like actually every moment, that's how deep the language was. You could put a word or put a name to rain to describe that phenomena, and the layers of meaning in that are infinite. And then actually every moment of unfolding of time, you could actually put a word to, and that, I think that is encapsulated by the idea of ka'anani'au. And I think that's, you know, the amount of things that I've learned, and the way I learned them is like this. We're talking about some of the most intelligent, profoundly intelligent minds that beyond what we could ever picture. I don't want to say in the world, because I definitely don't know, but the profound intelligence of their experience of life is one of the most amazing things to me.
And it was a very sensuous experience as well, because there was a sense of oneness with the environment that many of us are trying to recapture today. I know that the Rain Book is being followed by Hanauka Makana, and Kiele Gonzalez and her mom are putting together over 600 names for wind as well in their next book. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, Makani, I believe, is wind.
Makani,
yeah,
yes. Yeah. I'm sorry, Makani. I mean, well, would you tell us what inspired you to do this documentary?
The original inspiration, actually, it came from my frequent drives through the middle of the island to go to work, and I was always passing by the agricultural lands, and I was hearing a lot about GMO-related issues and the pesticides connected to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then my mind started to really try to wrap around this whole situation, like, wow, or what's growing in all our agricultural lands is hardly feeding us at all. And I knew the amount of pesticides couldn't have been good for the environment. And then through the amount of research into how the real conditions of the streams on the island were, and then what you can see directly as far as the life of the stream, I knew that, wow, this is a very complex situation that is almost unfathomable, because we need water and we don't have access to it that they once did. We need healthy land, and that has completely changed. And then I started asking why and looking through all the layers of what is the core issue. And then I came to a conclusion is that this is a globally connected world, and humanity has a dysfunctional relationship with the environment. And it's based on lack of intimacy and a feeling of disconnect. And so I started coming at it in that way, thinking things in terms of humanity. And the reason why is because a lot of my thinking is based on conflict resolution and really big scale, multi-generational healing and balancing. So you look at things differently. And so I knew as soon as you get the urge to blame someone, you already lost the big picture. And so it was like I had this criteria of how I could even approach this project, and one of them was this is conflict resolution on a global scale if you want to get to the root of it. And the root of it is that we have forgotten what our most fundamental relationship with the natural world is, and that it is a reflection of ourselves. Literally, we are part of it in a very literal sense.
And I think you have brought a video segment from the film and your fundraiser that maybe we could show right now and see what he's talking about in a little more depth.
The original inspiration for this movie came from concerns about GMO farming on the island of Oahu, and then beyond that, agricultural practices on the island of Oahu, and beyond that, invasive plant species and pollution. You know, a big part of this movie is really focused on understanding the importance of water. The more you learn about any traditional culture, and definitely here in Hawaii, you're going to get to some root understanding about water. The primary importance of fresh, clean water. Not one stream on this island is healthy in a traditional sense. That's big. We're so disconnected from water, and so do we really understand where we get our water from? Do we understand where the water we use goes? We've completely lost track of that. Ho'omaikapono really takes a look at classical Oahu and the natural cycles that are at play on this very island.
Kukani Loko is an area of about 36,000 acres on the central plains of the island of Oahu. The kapu is still on the land. It cannot be lifted. It'll be here. It's been here since time immemorial. It'll be here until time eternal.
So Ho'omaikapono is a movie that is dedicated to the island of Oahu with respect to the generations of Hawaiian people that lived and understood this island. That's really the background and the development of this, is what worked traditionally and why did it work. In the big picture, values determine sustainability, not renewable energy, not any elected official, not any economic policy. The values of each individual combined create sustainability.
So Tom, will you explain further for us the circles, the yellow circles on the map, and then the invasive species, I think that was coming down?
Well, on that little, that short video, the graphics that were there, there was 4 different graphics actually. The first one showed the primary GMO locations on the island. The second one showed the primary agricultural lands on the island. The third showed the invasive plant species, and you notice how it had arrows going throughout the whole island because when you start to really look around, the island is absolutely covered in primarily Lucano, which is kohaule, and then Californian guinea grass. And then there's other things around the wetland areas too. But so that was the third graphic. And then the fourth is the just basic pollution concerns. And one of the reports that I had found that really was alarming to me was Waikele being considered one of the most polluted public water supply wells in the United States.
That's so surprising to me because we always talk about how clean our water is because of the aquifers and the trickle down through the volcanic rock and soil and sand. And
yeah, I mean, what is readily visible to us, the part we directly interact with, we've basically put in a condition of I guess, dysfunction. I tend to think in terms of function and dysfunction. I learned to not think of things in terms that are black and white. When you think of terms of black and white, it's very, to me, I can say that that's a Western way of looking at things. A moment in time, frozen black or white issue. That's a Western way of looking at things. But then when you start to look at how time, actually how things unfold, and like, wow, it's never black or white. It's always unfolding. And it becomes more of an issue of untangling. And so when the knots are there, to me, that's dysfunctional. When our actions don't match a bigger picture, that's dysfunctional. But then when we match the larger picture, that's when things function. So that's just part of my thinking with this project.
Right, right. So what you're really demonstrating there is how it became dysfunctional,
yeah.
out of balance,
yeah.
with the introduction of invasive species. And I always wonder, how did Haolikoa get here? It is absolutely everywhere.
Well, a friend of ours, I believe, Kawi Lucas, really clarified this. Yeah. It's Lucana.
Lucana, right.
Which is that, ever since she told me that, it's stuck. Yeah, it's Lucana because we don't want to, Lucana is probably a better word to use, but it was fodder for cattle, essentially, but basically it's prolific. If everywhere I drive now, I'm always looking around, how's the condition of the land, and then that is the one thing. If you drive through the middle of the island up H2 and around H1, H2 area, it's amazing how much Lucana there actually is. And then you get closer towards the North Shore, other more precipitous parts of the island, and then you see more California grass and guinea grass. And that was a big concern when I started this movie. So
the invasive species coupled with GMO more recently, but pesticide-oriented mono-agriculture, yeah. etc., started to throw us out of balance.
Yeah, the way I have learned to really approach things is how do you to go through the layers to get to the root of the situation, and it becomes a completely different methodology, because my place is not in the political arena at all. That's not my role. And my role is to behold the unfolding of a multi-generational healing process. That's the way I would articulate it. And so my thinking is completely different in terms of like cause and effect of someone did this, so this happened. To me, what I always come back to is humanity is one organism, and there's a component of humanity that fell in love with technology, and it dragged the rest of the world with them at the expense of the cultures most connected to the environment, which are indigenous cultures. And so what we have is layers of technology, and technology even is building a railroad or making something out of steel or concrete. So look at it in terms of there's layers of technological developments, literally a timeline on top of the actual environment, which is the indigenous component. So I look at things in a sense like like that. It was an idea humanity had and ran with it at the expense of the environment and the indigenous cultures and our health overall, I would say.
Right. And a lack of understanding as less time was spent in grasping the connections and our connective tissue with the native natural species or natural resources.
Yeah.
So that one could argue, you know, that it wasn't deliberate all the time. It was ignorance about what the impacts would be.
And then ignorance, but it's like when I go through this, I keep getting to the point where someone knew. Humans have always had some. There have been people with a great capacity to understand the situation in depth, predict the outcome of doing something, and so I'm inclined to think that people knew. Someone knew, right? But what I realized got lost is the profound intelligence of the indigenous and what I call traditional mind. And then when you get, you know, one of the things I think we talked about was the aspect of a dictionary compared to real traditional perception. For instance, you have, for instance, people that were foreign to Hawaii coming here, making a language and putting things in dictionary and writing things down. And then, you know, as you learn about it, really Hawaiian definitions for volumes. Take Ponoshim's version of aloha, take ka'anani'o, take the word pono. So you end up doing something that separates the indigenous people from the bigger picture or puts them in a place that is not accurate.
And very limiting. I mean, we know
extremely
that...
limiting.
Yes,
limiting, yeah.
Well, one of the things that so well demonstrates, I think, your explanation of the layers is the mapping that you've done in Waikiki, particularly of the streams. So let's take a look at some of those photos and walk us through them.
Okay. Okay, so the island, this is the image that I made of the island. And you can see, if you look in the Kona moku, you can see the 6 primary moku, and then there's a kalana in the central plain. But Kona, bottom right, is where Waikiki and where we're at now, which would be Kou. The next slide would be Waikiki, and this is an overview. This is an image that I got from Eb Winger of University of Hawaii Cartography Department. Very high resolution. You can see the features we know today. Primary in this image would be Alawai Canal. And then go to the next image. And this is what Waikiki wants to do. This is how I picture, how I would explain this. This is what Waikiki wants to do. This is what the Native Hawaiians identified as the best course of action to perpetuate life in Waikiki. So you look on the left side, you see ponds, primarily you could say local or fish ponds. And what you see are these waterways coming down from 3 places, Makiki, Manoa, and Palolo. And then you have these 3 primary streams feeding the Waikiki area. And let's go to the next one. And then this is a close-up of Waikiki, the central location of Waikiki. And there are, in this image, 2 streams flowing into the ocean, Pu'ukehau and Ku'ikaunahe. I've heard that spelled different ways. And then you can see off to the left, Kalia, right, where Hilton Hawaiian Village is. There's a lot of ponds in that area. And then so you can see Alawai Canal, which is in the top third of the screen. What that did is it shut down the 3 primary streams that were visible above ground. Now, what we lose sight of a lot of times is that there are layers and layers of streams throughout this whole island. So
these streams, just to be clear, though, you said that it's what Oahu wants to do.
Yeah.
But these are the streams that existed, and this is from your research of maps from the 1800s.
That's correct.
And you've overlaid them on current day
That's
Waikiki.
Correct, yes. And you can see the place names too. Let's go to the next slide, I think. Okay, this is a more close-up view. And
so let me ask you here. So the fish ponds on the left all existed. Now there are buildings there. Where'd the fish ponds go? Are they sinking? Are their bases sinking all the time, or was it filled in?
They would have been filled in, but what we fail to remember, we see things so surface layer that can you really conceptualize that there's still layers of water under Waikiki? And that there's catacombs of air pockets and water flowing through still. But essentially, that's where the fish ponds were. They would have been filled in. But even still, you hear stories about the stream in the middle of Pu'ukehau that when it really rains a lot, that it floods certain basements in Waikiki. So the layers of the streams are still there.
Right, and we know that there's tremendous flooding in Waikiki, and that we have lots, we've shown on this show, some of the potential inundation with sea level rise, and that's the area that's going to be impacted tremendously because of the population density, as well as the low, you know, it's at sea level and in portions below. But what's interesting to me as you look at these streams is that in the old times, streams were allowed to ebb and flow and there were large floodplains so that their routes could be changed. And what we've done is we've hemmed them in, right? We've cemented in their thoroughfares into limited areas with very little floodplain, none in this photo. And what kind of impact does that have, and how does it create an imbalance?
Well, if we go back to the principal concept of people living in tune with the environment, and that is kana vai, the Hawaiian word for law. And
vai meaning water.
Vai meaning water.
So the law of water?
Well, it's much, much, much more profound than that. What that means in a traditional sense, in that root esoteric sense, is that we cannot live without managing water. Remember, traditional thought is interwoven with the big picture and intuitive knowing of balance and understanding that we're here to perpetuate life for generations well beyond us. Okay, so kana vai, every law has to trace back, in essence, if it's going to last, to the management of water. And so when I see what we've done today, when I think of it, we've just sliced ourselves from the big picture. If we put concrete there, we're actually disturbing the layer that we're most affected by, which would be the surface layer. The streams are still flowing underneath it all, but the layer that we interact with the most, the surface layer, and then maybe the several, the layers just beneath that we use for agriculture, we're limiting that. When you put concrete around a stream, you don't allow it to feed the land. That stream, what does it want to do? It wants to feed the land with life. It brings life. That's the root of it all. Water brings life.
Now, another thing that brings life are the phases of the sun and the moon. And I know that that's something that you have mapped in great detail. Yeah,
the idea is time and place. That's what a big separation is in our thinking, is not understanding where we are and what time it is in terms of our connection to the big picture. And so maps with the place names and the lunar cycle are two very important components that really align with traditional perception of life. Again, I think the lunar cycle is coming after Kukani Loko, I believe.
Okay, so the place in which so much of this was studied, as I've learned from you and also from the caretakers of Kukani Loko, Jolyn and Tom, of course, is the major caretaker, Lenchenko, is that it was an area, I understood, where Ali'i learned and trained the next generations, as well as being very well known for the birthing stones that exist there. So tell us more about Kukani Loko and what happened there as you walk us through your photos.
Okay, so I think, they're going to cue up some
coming up.
Photos.
Yeah.
I would always preface anything to do with a sensitive subject like this is the real way to learn is from the genealogical descendants. That is rule number one. And from there, it's a relationship with the place. Other than that, you're just learning little bits and pieces. So
it's in the center of the island.
Center of the island, metaphorically, spiritually, you could say too. And this is a diagram I made to show the basic concept. Kukani Loko at the center, and then its effects expanding throughout the whole island. You can see the sunrise at Makapu'u and the sunset at Ka'ena as well. That's a daily cycle. To me, when I look at this, it's like, oh, this is a daily cycle of this island.
Makapu'u being on the right of the map, on the east side, and Ka'ena being on the far
where the sun rays touch last. That's correct. And then the next slide. Waianae. Okay. you can see the sun setting. That's a typical time when I would visit. Okay, so that's sunset over Waianae.
Is that in Kole Kole Pass?
Yes,
otherwise
yes,
known
yes,
as Kole Kole
yes.
Pass.
And then the next slide. This is the Pohaku Pico, and this is this is the place that I gravitate towards the most, actually.
And the meaning of the Pohaku Pico is?
The central alignment for this island, and remove the surface layers to get to the root of it all. This would be the central alignment point for this island.
So for the Native Hawaiians at the time, they saw this as the center of their world, and in a way it was the center of the world, right?
Yeah, and I have learned to not use things in isolated past tense.
Okay.
I have come to understand that it still is a heartbeat for the culture. So I think that will unfold over time, but this is a very important place. And this would be the concentric circles, and then on the Pohaku.
You can see the circle there in the middle of the photo.
And then the next one, this is the you could call it serrated, but basically this aligns to peaks and places on the island.
So as you look across this stone and you follow the trajectory of the sun or the moon's light, it points, it goes in sync with many major elements on Oahu, right?
There is so much going on at that specific location. When I started getting to know Kukani Loko, I began to see that there is an innumerable amount of aspects to that site that to pinpoint it to, I mean, it does come down to alignment,
right? A
big part of it, and astronomical and sun and moon, etc., especially sun. That's true. Okay, so
the elite taught navigation, basically, or celestial understanding, moon phases. And there, I remember visiting there, and there's a navigational stone where the student would sit and could have a very unique perspective on the night sky and be able to learn navigation from that.
I would say it's even many, many layers more profound than that, because navigation is understanding your place in time. And that's the essence of this whole of Kukani Loko. Is we think of it as navigation, picture school of students, etc., but it was worlds more than that. That would be the place to get your ultimate clarity of life. That's where the focus of Ka'anani'o for this island would be.
Well, I want to make sure we have time to show you the interviews from your film, but maybe we'll take a quick peek at the lunar calendar, because I think it's worth it to take a minute to walk through that. Okay. And in the 3 minutes we have left in the show, let's close it with your interviews, because those are really moving.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so today the moon would have just risen a couple hours ago, and it would be Kukolo. This is a slide from the website, and this maps out what the moon is doing today. And the next slide would be, this is the moon calendar that I created, just a poster that shows the different, you could say phases, but I consider them cycles throughout the entire 29-half-day lunar cycle. And the next slide would show what is going on today. You can see in the bottom left corner, you can see the moon rise, the moon zenith, and then the moon setting. So the moon rises just before noon and late morning on this particular cycle, and then it's going to set just before midnight. And so on the poster that goes with this, it shows how the moon, the rising, zenith, and setting times for the entire 29-half-day cycle. The next phase would be, this comes from the website and explains the difference in the major rising and setting times of Hilo, Akua, and Kane, those three particular phases.
And what's fascinating to me is that we think of the moon only when we can see it at night.
True.
And what these do is map the full 24-hour trajectory of each moon phase and tell us where it's at and what that means with regard to our ecosystem. And that, to me, was absolutely stunning.
Okay. And I think we have a couple more. And then this shows the very first cycle, Hilo cycle, and the next, Akua. And you can see, if you look in the center, bottom center portion of the screen, you can see that the moon would appear full, usually Akua or Hoku, and it rises at sunset, and its zenith is around midnight, and then sets at sunrise. The next slide shows a diagram of Kane, Po Kane, and actually the moon of Kalo'opau is in the sky, a good portion of Kane. Okay. Next slide. And then that's the moon poster again.
And that's something you're going to be making available, particularly if people go on to your fundraising site, and that's one of the perks. And I'm looking forward to donating and getting one of those lunar calendars. But let's close with the interviews from your film, because they're really quite phenomenal.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, as those...
It was always said to us when we were little that if you take care of the land will take care of you. It is us that need to listen. It is us that need to hear.
The building blocks of us and everything around us, it all comes from the heavens.
This has been passed down for generation to generation to generation because it is that important for us.
So Hawaiian culture is a specific way of acting in universal principles. It's the practice of an idea. And that's why observable knowledge is completely necessary. Not just textual knowledge, contextual knowledge. And that's why we are in service of native knowledge systems, because they're specific to a place and they have endured for a long time.
It's something that's really beyond words or concept, but it's in finding that. And when you find that within yourself, you find what links us with all that we're in and each other, and you feel that connection. Yeah?
With Ho'oponopono, it's the same thing. It's a peeling off of layers. And after the layers are all exposed, then you are the one that basic essence of who you are is there.
Ka'anani'au, remember, Ka'anani'au is our turn to make beautiful. When they come and when they went, that was their beautiful period of time. We have to be that example for them to carry on, forever, as long as we can.
And she said, I am going to share with you the deeper meanings of what it means to live in this place and who we are. And so she started to share, amongst other things, this deeper meaning of aloha. The ha is the essence of who we are. And for us, it begins with our center, our ha, our breath. She even related it to other cultures or heritage. She said the Japanese, it's ki, ki-ai. Chinese, they call it chi, the chi, energy. For us, we call it ha, because it's the essence of our breath. So if you want to connect with someone or something, what you need to do is find the moment of emptiness. You must ha, and find it.
So tell us, Tom, is our relationship with the environment and our relationship with each other what's needed for true sustainability and return to balance?
Ultimately, it would come down to the relationship within ourselves and understanding and resolving that first. So a really big part of this project is to emphasize self-refinement, and that the understanding that we all intuitively know what is right for us to do. And those are the blueprints inside of each of us. And when we learn to follow that, whatever it may be, this is well beyond religion or politics or economy, then it can manifest with each other and in the environment. But ultimately will come down to self-refinement.
And I think some of those tools for self-refinement are much needed, and organizations like Kanu Hawaii are helping us to make those habit change that refine who we are and how we interact. So I hope people will take it upon themselves to make those changes. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next Tuesday at noon during your lunch hour for Sustainable Hawaii. Thank you for joining us.